Hello, I'm back, powering through some more videos, and this is a record that I listened to this morning. And I've been wanting to do this video because I feel like this is a record and a group that doesn't really get its due. And I wanted to spend a few minutes talking about it. This is a group from Sheffield, England, Clock DVA. And the album I will be talking about is Buried Dreams. And I'm going to be talking about a few 12 inches that came out around this time. Clock DVA is an interesting group. People lazily refer to these guys as industrial. I don't. This music is way too complicated to just trivialize it with a broad term like that. I've always thought of this album and this music that Clock DVA does as introspective music. There's a lot going on here, and they give you a lot of images to swallow and a lot of phrases to try to decipher. And then they give you the music. Very atmospheric music. And you definitely have to be in a certain mood to listen to listen to this music. It's not something that you just want to listen to on any random day of the week. It's introspective. When you're trying to figure out the world, maybe even yourself a little bit, you're trying to delve into topics that might be uncomfortable for you, but then at the end of it, you feel like you might understand the world a little better. You might understand your neighbor a little better. You might understand people in your own family better, your friends better. This is the kind of album that expands your mind and gives you an experience that you haven't had before. So, do you want to call that industrial? I wouldn't. It's a lot more than that. And I love this record. I don't think this has gotten its due in the world of industrial music, if you want to call it that. If I were to compare this group to any other group, it might be Cabaret Voltaire. And I know Voltaire CV is from Sheffield as well. Obviously, there's something in the water there. There's a little label that's called Warp that's from Sheffield too. So obviously, there's something going on in that town that produces music that sounds like this. But I think the only band that you could comfortably, responsibly compare to Clock DVA is Cabaret Voltaire. They both had a very direct message, heavily used samples. Lots of the music was electronic, but also there was some real instrumentation going on, a real mixture of that happening, and the direct messaging. Really, there's nothing that I can think of that sounds like Clock DVA. And this is my favorite record for them. From them, they were around for a while. They had been around for a good decade before this came out. They produced a lot of stuff. Mostly it was on cassette and CD, so I haven't heard a lot of Clock DVA's early stuff. I know they've had some recent compilations that come out, lots of older stuff getting re-released. I know that's happened. I haven't really heard a lot of that. What I do know really well is this record here, Buried Dreams. And that's a really appropriate title, I think. Listening to this record is like having a dream. It's really, really awesome, interesting. Interesting is that's a horrible thing to say. It's such a boring word. This record definitely excavates something deeper within yourself. It's a haunting record to listen to. It conjures up some images that maybe you don't want there. Every time I listen to this, I think of the darker times of my life. It forces me into a corner to confront certain things. And I think we all have albums like that do that to us. Things bubble to the surface that maybe you don't want to deal with, but then you feel like a better person afterwards by confronting those things. And this album does that. Certain music does that for us, right? For me, it's this. A very hazy, dreamlike album. If anything, I would if I had to slap any kind of genre onto this, I might say it's ambient. It's that kind of sound. And it's a nice, this is the Wax Trax release. Get a gatefold sleeve, some spooky imagery here. Gonna let you take a long look at that. And then you've got some, you've got some disturbing images here on the cover. I'm not going to describe that. You can look at it and figure that out for yourself. And the 12 inches have the same kind of disturbing, weird, unsettling imagery. So I'm going to look at that and check that out. And I'll read what's on the back cover here. Clock DVA are hacking into the mainframe. Our virus is virulent. Memories lay short-circuited. This energy, this electricity, this AVD and electrochemistry of sound, DVA are calculating a new algebra, a program or density. Only the act can reveal, make visible the unseen. DVA will illuminate with phonetized apparitions of velvet realm. That's what this music is. Are you going to slap that industrial tag on that now? It's probably a bad idea, right? Where was I? A new reign where the hacker develops a heuristic approach, an amalgamation of technology and Geist. Clock DVA, the next generation, are preparing for major digital audio warfare. Sound is a weapon, a sononuclear device that can cut through the psychological barriers set up by corporate systems. This is not talk of new, but talk of old. Inset dates, codes, longevity. The future holds many shapes. DVA is one of them. Yeah, that's what you're listening to. And that's a good way to put it. It's important to, if you're going to have music that's different, it's important to put the listeners in a mind that they've never been in before. And that's what this is. Here are the labels. I've never heard music like this before. The music, what it is to me, is very quiet, very intricate, very well produced, high technology with whispers of horror film samples, vocals that kind of flit in and out like a ghost. You don't really know what they're saying, like a dream. That's what this record sounds like. They do a really, really amazing job of executing that vision here. Absolutely one of the best and most underrated records in the Wax Trax catalog, for sure. When you think of Wax Trax, what do you think of? You think of the I word, right? Industrial. Absolutely an unsung little gem of a record. Let me get into the 12 inches here. This is the Act. Some different versions. By the way, this all of this shit's on Apple Music. I just looked it up before I made this video. All of these versions, these mixes, some more unsettling imagery. All of these versions and tracks are on Apple Music, and it sounds great. I would highly recommend you check that out. There's the old Wax Trax insert. Some of my records have that, some of them don't, because I used a lot of them to order more records or shirts or posters or whatever. Nothing too exciting going on the label there. The Act it's a slightly different version than the album version. And then you get Sonology of Sex on the other side, which is not on the album. And as always, if you're going to check out Buried Dreams, I would check these out too. They go very well with it. This is another 12 inch from this period. All of these are on Wax Trax, by the way, every one of these records. Some cool imagery there. The Hacker. And the B-side, The Connection Machine. That's a cool song. Somebody help me out here. I feel like I'm losing my mind. By the way, look how awesome that cover is. I love that cover. Hacking was a very primitive concept at this point too. People didn't know what that meant. This came out in 1990, so I think, right? I'm almost positive this 12-inch came out in 1990. Where 1988, really? 1988. All right. I thought it was 1990, even earlier. So yeah, this was a really primitive concept then. Somebody help me out though. I remember a story, and I can't remember if I heard it from somebody or I read it. I feel like I read it, that somebody listened to this before they went out and murdered somebody. Does anybody remember this story? I Googled this recently and I couldn't find anything on it. I, I can swear that I read something about this. And this is back in the 80s or early 90s. But somebody listened to this record, The Hacker, and decided they were going to go out and do something heinous. And I think they murdered somebody. Am I not remembering this right? Can somebody help me on this? I would love to know because I swear I read that somewhere, but I can't find anything on it now. I remember at the time that made listening to that record sound even more naughty and dangerous and made it more spooky. This is my favorite 12-inch from this period, Sound Mirror. This is really excellent stuff, man. This is just really well produced electro music in a lot of ways. It's got that spooky ambience to it, but in really nice sampling, unjarring, unsettling sampling, but excellently produced electro music. The best single, I think, from this album right here, Sound Mirror. Really fantastic stuff. Let me pull this out. There's that, as always. Gotta have your Wax Trax insert. Well, I don't need to pull this out. Love that logo, too. Check that out. Now, this, I'm almost sure this came out after those other two. I want to say 1989 at the very latest. Because if that other one was 88, this has got to be 89 or 90. 89. Okay. They definitely had a really nice sound on this 12-inch. Maybe a sound that I never heard them do again quite like this. But all of these singles fall into this. And if you haven't heard this, you need to. Those of you who have checked out all of my other industrial videos, you know I hate that word, but if you're into those other types of groups on my channel and you haven't heard this, you got to hear it. This is really cool stuff. You have to be in a certain mood. There's no question about it. But let me read some of these. Here on the inner gatefold, you have these passages. Little bits of text that put you in the mindset to listen to this music. This is for Buried Dreams, the track, the opening track. Based on the infamous life of the Countess Elizabeth Bathory, who over the course of her existence murdered over 1,000 females in the castles of her estates, the extremity of her sadistic crimes are cataloged in the court reports of her trial in 1611. She was incarcerated in her own castle where she died at the age of 54 in 1614. In reality, she was de Sade's heroine, the living embodiment of de Sade's extremist dreams. So each song has these little bits of information. That's what you read while you're hearing this music. And, you know, if you're the type of person who's creative or you enjoy reading and you like music, you're going to get really into this vibe. How can you not? Here's a little bit for Sound Mirror. This is what it says for the track Sound Mirror. The mirror as a means of trafficking with spirits and seeing past and future events reflected in its depths was originally based upon the mirror of the waters beneath the earth. The subliminal abyss of the subconsciousness typified by the cross and the intersection of space-time present symbolized by the vertical beam of extraterrestrial and clairvoyant vision. That's an excellent way to describe this record. This is an experience. This is an album that you listen to when you're trying to crawl inside of yourself. Maybe pull out some things that you didn't know were there. Uncomfortable things, ugly things. This is the record to do that. And I'd highly recommend that you pick up these 12 inches along with it. You get different versions and some B-sides. Even better, if you have Apple Music, all this stuff is on there. This album and all of these singles and B-sides are compiled into one album on Apple Music. There's no excuse for you to not check this out. It's easy to access it. Not an accessible album. This is not a very easily palatable album. Not easy to take, but to me, that's what industrial music should be. It's not necessarily club music. It's not necessarily anything other than a feeling, a way of life, a way to internalize sound and bring out something inside yourself and externalize that. Look no further. Clock DVA, Buried Dreams. A classic, underappreciated, waiting for your listening enjoyment. Until next time, bye.